Hi guys, I'm really sorry if it's a bit loud. It's like 35 degrees here, so I've got a fan blaring at me, which I'm hoping is going to give me this sort of like ethereal, hair blowing in the wind thing, but it probably won't. But anyways, I have a small confession. I haven't really planned this week's vlog. Usually I know what I'm going to be talking about and I do a little prep, but this week's just kind of got on top of me and I haven't really got around to it. So what I want to talk to you guys about this week is actually something that me and my critique partner were talking about for our works in progress. Now, we're both historical fiction writers, and we were discussing the fact that both of us, who are incidentally both white middle-class women, feel is a bit of a hot topic at the moment, and it might even be a little bit controversial, and that is the whole own voices thing. Now, let me just clarify right away, I have zero issue with own voices. I think it's incredibly important that everyone is equally represented in literature and that it's not completely dominated by one demographic. That said, I do take issue with the fact that there are some people out there who have a real problem with anybody that dares to kind of write out of their sphere of experience. Now, the issue I have with this is that my experience is inevitably limited, as I would like to point out, is every single person on this planet. Nobody can say for sure exactly what it's like to live like somebody else at all. And I would actually argue that it's impossible to do that even for your characters. They are figments of your imagination, composed of things that you've seen, read, heard, and sometimes experienced yourself, but they are very rarely coming directly from you. There aren't that many writers, I think, or at least in my, admittedly limited experience, that actually write exactly what they know and experience. Because if we did, our bookshelves would be bloody boring, because I'm willing to bet that Audrey Niffenegger, author of The Time Traveller's Wife, probably doesn't have a husband that time travels. Anthony Doerr, for example, the author of All the Lights We Cannot See, he writes from the perspective of a young girl who is blind, and he isn't a young blind girl. But he does it with sympathy and empathy, and we care greatly for his character, and it's an incredibly successful and brilliant book. Philippa Gregory probably doesn't know what Anne Boleyn was feeling like just before she had her head chopped off. But we fundamentally, as writers and artists, cannot write exactly and only what we know, which means we do have to step out of our comfort zones. Now, here's the thing. What I was chatting about with my critique partner is that we are both writing characters who aren't our main characters, I'd like to add, that have something to them that is quite far out of our realm of experience. So that means that we are having to get quite creative and imagine how people feel. Now, we were saying that that makes us nervous because obviously we want to be sensitive and we don't want to alienate people that are going to read it who have perhaps experienced these things. So in my case, one of my main characters, not my main character, but one of them is Jewish. And as you know, if you've watched my other vlogs, my book is set in the middle of World War II, so you can kind of imagine, if you have a vague idea of world history, back in the 1930s, being a Jew wasn't really something that made your life very easy. So I've had to imagine, based on what I've read, heard, experienced, seen in other books, seen in documentaries, read from first-hand testimonies, what that would be like. Now, do I have a right to tell that story? There would be a lot of people that would quite rightly argue, no, I'm not Jewish, I don't have a right to tell that story. But does that mean now that we are never going to have another book that talks about the Holocaust? Does it mean we're never going to have anybody else talking about what it must have been like to experience that level of persecution? Because that's dangerous. If you're saying that we can only talk about something if you've experienced it firsthand, we're limiting the kind of stuff that we're actually going to be talking about. And these are conversations that need to happen. Now, in my book, I would argue that I think we need to talk about this and understand how people were living and experiencing and feeling and the fears and worries that they would have had. And we need to make that relevant for today. And, my book, although it's talking in the context of 1930s Britain, France, Germany, it definitely draws parallels to what we're experiencing today. Now, if I only wrote my book from the main character's perspective, who is a aristocratic white young woman, of whom you could argue that I have much more in common, although I'm not an aristocrat, that would be a really two-dimensional book. I need those other characters' voices in that book to give it shape and to give it depth and to give it purpose. my main character hasn't experienced that much yet. She's 19 at the start of the book. So if we were only talking about her limited experience, we wouldn't really have a story at all. So, own voices. An incredible concept, and one that I thoroughly support, and I worry that perhaps I'm not conveying myself very well at this moment, and perhaps it sounds like an attack on own voices. That is not what this is. I'm just trying to say that we should have the freedom to write what we need to write. We have a story inside us that we need to tell. That's why we're writers. So yes, be sensitive. Don't write something that's going to alienate a lot of people. Write sensitively. Get people to read it who maybe have got that experience. So for example, in my book, I'm going to be getting some of my Jewish friends to read it and just check that I'm being sensitive, that they wouldn't be offended reading my words, because that is the last thing I want to do. I want to provoke a conversation. I want people to be interested and engaged. And that sometimes means writing what you don't know. It's a famous line, isn't it? Write what you know. But frankly, it's so limiting. And in my experience, most great literature breaks a lot of rules. So I am writing what I don't know, and I'm proudly doing so. And that might not make me friends. Some people watching this video might think, no, sorry, I really firmly believe that you don't have the right to tell that story. Leave that to people who can tell that story. But find me a German Jewish refugee who was born in the 1920s, and yeah, okay, cool, they can write my story. It's a little bit controversial, I know, but it's how I feel. I can't write stories just about my own experience, because I'm not really writing my voice. I have done in the past, and I might do in the future. There's a story I'd quite like to tell about my experience living in France, for example. But that's not the story I'm writing now. It's not the story I was inspired to tell. So, for my future readers out there, I hope you can forgive me if you feel like I stepped out of line. But for any of you who are experiencing a similar thing and are feeling crippled by the fact that you can't write what you feel like you need to write, just know that there are a lot of writers out there that do the same thing. And I think it's about approaching it with sensitivity and research, and with support from people within the community or sphere that you are trying to write about, and asking for their influence and support. Nobody writes wanting to hurt somebody else. They're writing because they have a story to tell. So I'm sorry that this ended up turning into a bit of a rant, but it's how I feel, and I think it's something that we should talk about on the AuthorTube platform. I think it's a good conversation to be having. Lily Mead, for example, has an excellent series on writing diversely, and she makes a lot of really interesting points, and I agree with her. But at the same time, I think we shouldn't limit ourselves by these writing rules that were put in place with good intentions. But I think good writing is about conveying empathy. You need to be able to empathise with people who are going through things that you haven't experienced. I hope you can forgive me in advance. If any of you read my book and feel like I haven't done it justice, there will always be people that feel like that, and I respect your opinion. But I'm doing the best I can to tell the story that I need to tell, and I hope you can forgive me for that, and maybe even enjoy it. So that's what I've got for you this week. I hope it was interesting. If you did enjoy this, maybe hit like and subscribe, and if you agree or disagree, please do chat with me in the comments below. I read every comment, and I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say. This is just my perspective. There'll be plenty of people who disagree, but we live in a society where we are actually allowed to do so. So let's relish the opportunity to talk freely. So take care, guys. I'll speak to you next week. Bye.